Hey everybody, I'm Clayton Griffin, Executive Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer at OTR Solutions.
And I'm Jason Kirkpatrick, Director of Operations for Epay Manager.
And today we're going to be diving into the Epay Advantage, how it compares to other payment platforms.
So Clayton, one of the questions we get all the time is how are you different, and aren't all carrier payment platforms exactly the same? Do they do the same thing?
That's a great question, and we understand that on the face, all the carrier payment platforms might look similar. But when you really dig in, Epay Manager takes a fundamentally different approach to carrier payments and back office. I like to think of it like Blockbuster versus Netflix. Mm-hmm. Both of them give you the ability to watch video on demand, but as we all know, there are a lot of differences between those two experiences.
Yeah, you don't have to go reserve or hope that your movie's in stock at Blockbuster. You can watch it whenever you want on Netflix instead, no limitations.
And when we talk to brokers at the end of the day, a lot of the questions that they ask actually go away just because of the fundamentally different approach that Epay Manager takes.
Yeah, concerns that they have are not concerns in our platform.
Absolutely. And today we're going to dive into a few of those core features that Epay Manager does that really set the platform apart.
Mm-hmm. Things like the carrier and workflow experience, right? Or how the invoice is proactively created by the broker instead of reacting to an invoice coming through your inbox.
Yep, plus payment facilitation and then embedded working capital solutions.
One of the first things we'll talk about as far as the difference would be our interactive carrier and factor experience with our platform. We believe that it's important to provide a higher degree of transparency and visibility to our carrier and factor partners. That makes everybody's life easier when they know exactly what's going on in a transaction, where our competitors tend to think that there's only a need for general status updates.
Yeah, and being that we've been on the OTR factoring side a user of the Epay Manager platform for more than 10 years, we have a unique experience to how factoring companies and carriers are engaging with brokers and the back office. Generally speaking, for brokers that don't have, our interactive portal for carriers and factors to go get status, we're having to make outbound calls, we're having to email, and we're constantly having to use those unstructured forms of communication to get information about the invoices that either we're trying to verify or that we're trying to get payment status on. By making that visible and providing transparency, those calls, those emails completely go away. And in addition to that, the interactive nature of the invoicing process itself is a true differentiator.
Right.
By taking the invoicing process out of the antiquated email world, right, out of Blockbuster, and turning it into a platform where you're proactively going in, you're submitting invoices to the correct load every single time. We know as a factoring company, the carrier knows. You're able to submit and resolve disputes within the platform, providing transparency to the broker, instead of them having to respond to an email that says, hey, you owe this carrier detention. We're able to log it in the system very clearly so that the broker can work it, and we're all on the same page throughout the entirety of the process. It really makes our life easier.
And guess who else likes not having those calls from the factoring company and the carrier in the email? The broker.
Absolutely.
They don't have to step outside of their normal day to answer questions that can be answered automatically in a platform when you provide that visibility to the carrier and the factor.
Yep, and when you close off that open valve to the world via that email invoicing workflow, what ends up happening, and we talk about this with brokers a lot, is misdirected payments are a huge issue in our industry. You have a lot of assignments changing, you have carriers switching factoring companies, you have carriers removing factoring companies, you have, carriers that might have been misassigned by the broker on the load. And so by only allowing the appropriate carrier to upload the paperwork, you identify those issues more quickly, and, in many cases, the factor carrier is actually helping you resolve those. And at the end of the day, that interactive carrier and factor workflow ultimately leads to a 98% reduction in billing inaccuracies.
Why? Because we start with that TMS data. And if you look at the normal audit, you're looking at 100% of the invoices that catch that 1 or 2% exception rate. If we start with your data, have the carrier or factor validate that, then you're only focused on that 1 or 2% of the transactions that are exceptions that don't match their expectations.
And some of our enterprise clients and other enterprise multi-billion-dollar brokerages that we are talking to right now are seeing 30% plus short paid invoices. That is a massive drain on not only profitability, but imagine the time and effort. I mean, this is tens of thousands of loads that they're having to go back and figure out why something was short paid, when in the end, this interactive carrier and factor, getting the carrier and factor involved on the front end is going to trim those down significantly, allow you to eliminate them on the front end and never have to worry about them again.
And correct them on the shipper end too, so that you're not faced with surprise shortfalls on your invoicing to your shipper.
Which is another topic that we'll get into here shortly.
And that brings us into our next topic really perfectly, is our proactive invoicing workflow, which is unique. We believe that the invoice should be proactively triggered by the broker, which allows better consistency and accuracy because it's controlled by the broker's TMS, as opposed to what our competitors do, which is a reactive process, reacting to emails that can be sent by anybody to that broker.
100%. And I kind of jumped the gun a little bit on this one, but it feeds through the rest of the platform. And we do take a fundamentally different approach to invoicing. Emails are unreliable. Emails are unstructured. There's no way to track. There's no way to get really solid KPIs about performance of internal teams. And so by consolidating that invoicing workflow into a platform, you're able to see how many invoices are my team members able to approve on a daily basis. And what we've seen is that Epay Manager clients have significantly higher thresholds because they're not having to sift through all the nonsense and the trash that comes through those open valve email inboxes.
Or the duplicates. You know, the carrier sends the same email with the same invoice.
Or the piecemeal submissions.
Yeah.
You know, you send a page of the POD in every separate email, and you have to figure out how do these all fit together.
Right.
And then you have to compile them, consolidate them, upload them into your TMS. All of that completely goes away when you're invoicing via a platform.
Right. And our philosophy is you're using the emails that you're getting, you're trying to compare them against your TMS. So why not just start with that TMS data, create the invoice proactively the way that we do, eliminates work for both the carrier and the broker, and makes everybody's lives easier.
And when you don't have to match documents to loads because they're going to be matched using your TMS data already, you get to do more creative things with OCR and NLP around, hey, did I find the customer reference number on this particular bill of lading? Do I have the right number of pages on the bill of lading? And some really fun and creative stuff to really drive a higher degree of efficiency. So ultimately what this proactive invoicing workflow leads to is a 300 to 500% increase in invoice processing per team member. I mean, that's tripling, quadrupling, or quintupling,
Whatever the number is.
your production from an invoices per team member, which, I mean, that's some serious gains.
Yeah. And that's before we add the AI on top of it,
That's absolutely right.
where you could have potentially a zero-touch approval on most of your accounts payable. So the sky's the limit, really. As our AI engine learns more and more about your documents and what your shippers need, you'll be able to automate and no-touch the majority of your transactions.
Who gets credit for those?
I don't know. And that leads us perfectly into our next topic, our industry-leading AI engine for documents, right? So we believe that the AI should be doing more than just indexing the pages. Provide insights to the broker. What could potentially be missing? What is missing? What's not exactly right? Where our competitors may only be satisfied by looking at the individual indexing of pages instead of giving those insights to the broker.
100%. You used to be happy being able to spend, an hour going to Blockbuster and picking out a movie or maybe 3 or 4 movies.
Right.
Now, it's at your fingertips. And if you can't find something to watch in a couple of minutes, you're probably unsatisfied.
Right.
And so the math changes, the equation changes, the expectations change when you flip the script and you're able to really capitalize on some of this new and exciting technology that is hitting the industry. But the only way you can really do that is if you have the right structure in place.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, we are very passionate about not compromising our brokerage clients' shipper relationships or their carrier relationships. And so we have to have a high degree of confidence in those automations that we are deploying through the platform. And the only way to do that, you can't do that with email.
No.
If you're relying on email, it's going to be unsustainable and too unstructured to be able to get into that finite, really specific, detailed AI, NLP type of workflow.
Right. So rather than trying to guess whether that invoice is correct and is legitimate or accurate, We know what to expect because we've created the invoice. So now we can focus on what truly matters, is the document, and whether the document has the correct information to bill the customer, whether it matches that structured data, and obviously whether it's clean and readable. So not only can we index those pages, but we can point out those insights, point out the potential problems. So the broker is only focused on those exceptions rather than having to sift through every email to find every document and invoice.
So now that we've added the AI audit engine to the best-in-class Epay workflows, what we're seeing is a 75% reduction in AP audit time. So what does that mean? It means that you're able to get invoices processed and therefore bill to your shippers more quickly. What does that mean? It means days to invoice is significantly reduced. DSO, days sales outstanding, is significantly reduced, which puts money, working capital, back into a broker's bank so that they can then deploy those funds, do with them what they will, continue to grow their business, and do what ultimately a lot of our clients do best, is focus on other areas than the back office because we're taking that burden off their plate.
Yep.
And I mean, speaking of kind of the consolidated AP, the value of both your carrier and your shipper relationships really goes into the next advantage. We believe that tethering the AP and the AR transactions lead to a more streamlined back office workflow, while our competitors are not really focused on making that shipper invoicing process more efficient and are only really focused on carrier payments.
Right. Some don't focus on the AR at all. And what we found is that a lot of brokers have a separated AP and AR team, and they're doing the same work twice.
Looking at the same documents.
Same documents for different reasons, but they're looking at them twice, and there's no reason to do that. Again, we start with that structured data. We can import the AP and the AR data. We know what the expectation is. And as those documents come in and get reviewed either by AI or by a person, they can be automatically prepared to go out to the shipper on that invoice. So it's one group doing both sides of the work.
And ultimately, that structural difference, right, that fundamental difference with how Epay Manager is structured, cuts your operating cost in half. Mm-hmm. Let's just say you got two teams of equal size doing AP and AR. Before all of the other stuff that we've already talked about, just the fundamental change and the shift in leveraging your quality human resources to do the work out of a centralized AP/AR workflow can cut your operating cost on the back office in half.
Right. And speaking of costs, one of our other core differences is just the free same-day clearance of funds. We believe that you should hold onto your funds to the maximum amount possible. There's no reason, like some of our competitors, to hold those funds for multiple days where they can earn an additional hidden fee on that hold.
And they end up ultimately charging their broker clients interest.
Right.
That's really what that equates to, because they're holding their money while it quote unquote clears, and they're making a fee on that float because they're selling those funds back to the Fed overnight. And we've been extending credit to brokers in the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars for more than a decade. We're very comfortable with 1, 2, or 3 days of exposure while we make payments to carriers before those funds clear on the back end.
Yeah, and why make it tighter for that broker who's already in a tougher
especially in this
today.
Environment right now. We have seen that it's tough. Brokerage margins are compressed. It's a highly competitive environment, and we want to make our clients as competitive as they possibly can be. We certainly don't want to strip away some of that competitiveness by hindering their cash flow and their working capital. And so ultimately, what not holding our broker clients' funds while we wait for those transactions to clear leads to is, for a $100 million broker, that is about $100,000 in interest cost savings because we are not holding those funds for 3+ days, which, that's a difference maker.
Yeah, what could you do as a broker with that additional fund, those additional funds on a yearly basis? Speaking of funding, we also believe in the need for flexible funding. We believe that a broker should be able to utilize our platform regardless of whether or not they need funding. Our competitors typically tie the funding requirement to utilize their platform. And we provide many different options for the brokers that need maybe only quick pay funding. Maybe they need to extend their days to pay, or maybe they don't need anything at all. and our system and our platform can accommodate all those brokers.
Yeah, and a fundamental difference, if a broker has the liquidity to be able to offer a quick pay program with their cash, we take none of their fee. That's something that they're able to offer. They're leveraging their cash, and we are not going to come in and take 50% of their quick pay fee when they're the ones that are putting up the money. So they retain the entirety of that revenue, and we take no additional fee whatsoever. Our platform truly can be that SaaS platform that allows brokers to use it however they see fit without hidden fees or additional costs layered in.
Yeah, and we can also build in the flexibility for specific types of transactions. If there's one particular shipper or a certain scenario that a broker may need assistance with, it can be that fine-tuned instead of an all or nothing environment.
And working capital on the OTR side has been our bread and butter for many, many years. And so we've seen just about every scenario when it comes to extending credit to brokers, right? Extending credit in order to facilitate a more competitive quick pay offering. Yeah. Extending credit because you've got a slower paying customer that's a blue chip customer that we know is going to pay, but they pay in 90 days. And you're expected to pay your carriers in 30 days. You shouldn't have to turn down that business because you're unable to float that cash in an additional 60 days. We can step in and provide some liquidity, all integrated into the Epay platform. And so ultimately what all the options that Epay provides from a quick pay perspective leads to a 12% adoption rate of quick pays for Epay broker clients. And I can speak from the thousands of conversations that we have had with brokers, and generally speaking, we see that in the 2%, 3% best in class for somebody using other platforms or not using a platform at all is maybe 5%. All right, to recap all the features that we've gone through in detail, we'll start with interactive carrier and factor experience. We believe that providing carriers and factoring companies with more information makes everybody's life easier, while our competitors think that providing limited information is enough.
Our proactive invoicing workflow, we believe, is important because we start with the broker's source of truth, which eliminates work for both the broker and their carrier or factors. Where our competitors, we rather rely on a reactive process and continue to send email.
Now on to our industry-leading AI audit engine. We believe that AI should be able to do more than just index documents and actually present exceptions for review, while our competitors are simply happy indexing and classifying documents.
Another benefit be our integrated AP and AR workflows. We believe that centralizing the AP and AR workflows makes a broker more efficient. Rather than doing duplicative work and separating your teams out, allow those teams to work together to better pay your carriers and invoice your customers, where our competitors are happy just focusing on AP.
Now on to free same-day clearance. We believe you should be able to hold on to your money as long as humanly possible, while our competitors hold your funds and actually make money off of that.
And finally, flexible funding. We believe flexibility in funding is important and crucial to our relationship with our brokers. We want to make them successful and not require them to always treat every carrier or customer exactly the same, where our competitors have a more rigid approach to whether funding is required or not.
So we're going to flash up some quick stats, a lot of the stuff that we've talked about. These are some key stats that Epay brokerage clients are taking advantage of via the Epay Manager platform.
And you can go ahead and scan the QR code on your screen now if you'd like to schedule a demo and learn more about how we can help your company.
And with that, I think we will kick it into the Q&A portion of the webinar. Send your questions in and we'll get them answered. All right, let's dive into the Q&A. What's the first question, Maddie?
All right, first question we have is, how soon will I realize the advantages of Epay within my own brokerage if I signed up today?
It's a great question, especially for our customers that are already on an integrated TMS platform. They can be up and running as little as 2 weeks and seeing an immediate impact on their business. Because of our high adoption rate in our industry, with over 200,000 members that are familiar with the system and utilize it regularly, they know how the process works, and you have a very easy transition from your old methods to the Epay platform.
Yeah, I mean, you effectively shut off the invoice email valve, roughly 95+% of carrier relationships with new broker clients already have an Epay account.
Yep.
Which means that portion is completely taken care of. They're used to working out of Epay, and instead of submitting invoices via email, they immediately switch to submitting invoices via the Epay Manager platform. To make up for that 5%, you notify those carriers. We do collectively. We'll reach out and make calls for anybody who isn't registering or submitting paperwork, and make the transition really straightforward. And then you can say bye-bye to email invoices. All right. Question number 2.
The number 2 question was, how does Epay help prevent fraud?
It's a great question. I think one that everybody is asking themselves in the industry right now over the course of the last couple of years, as we've seen fraud take a massive uptick. Epay is uniquely positioned to remove a really risky form of communication from your business. I mean, all of the breaches that have happened over the course of the last couple of years are generally due to phishing scams that mostly come through emails.
Right.
And when your team is receiving thousands and thousands of emails and they're trying to work through them as quickly as they can, there's a really high likelihood that they might click on something that they're not supposed to, or that they might not notice that it's from, a fraudulent party. And so by removing that, like I said, that open valve to the world, you significantly limit and restrict essentially who has access to your world and your platform.
Yeah, it's like leaving your house open, your car unlocked in a bad neighborhood. You're inviting trouble when you have an open inbox to the entire world. Anybody can submit anything, and Epay is all about control, and you control who has access to the transaction. You control how the transactions are created, and you limit the ability for those bad actors to interact with you in a negative way.
Absolutely. Do we have any other questions?
We sure do. The next one is Epay more expensive than other payment platforms?
No, it's not. I mean, we offer very competitive pricing, and I would say more importantly, it's a very straightforward pricing by transaction. There's no hidden costs. There's nothing that we are changing about your service or how we interact with you or your funds, which some of our competitors do. And when you look at the bottom line, the cost savings, if you will, that come along with implementing Epay, I mean, we always present cost-benefit analysis to our prospects as we're going through the process with them, so they have a really solid understanding of what they can expect to get out of the platform. And so you have the transactional cost, but more importantly, you have all the savings, right? When you flip on a platform and you're able to reduce your back office cost by 50% overnight, and then continue to refine that, increase your productivity of your team by 3 or 5x, those are significant cost savings, and it pales in comparison to the transactional costs. Right. Keep in mind, you can generate revenue via QuickPay, you can retain your funds longer, you can increase working capital, so it just makes for a much healthier back office that ultimately leads to a more robust bottom line. And the more you grow, we allow you to grow without scaling and adding staff, and we're always giving you volume discounts. If you are going to grow your company, we can adjust your transaction. And one last thing, because we get asked this question too, unlimited licensing. So your team has access, you can give access to the Epay platform to however many people in your organization that you want. We're not going to charge you a per seat cost, which I think makes it easy. Right. Last one, Maddie?
Yep. The last one here is going to be, what would the competitors say is Epay's biggest disadvantage?
That's a great question. Jason, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think if you were going to say, comparing to our competitors, what's the biggest disadvantage would be they think it's a disadvantage to have a membership. We do require our payees to register, and that goes back to the fraud prevention. We want to control who has access. We don't want to give a simple email address that is open to everybody in the world, and that's where we disagree with our competition. We want to control and restrict the access, and we don't believe that membership is an obstacle the way that others may. It's a 2-minute form.
In fact, it hasn't. I mean, like I said, 95% of carriers that you're working with already are likely already registered and familiar with how to use Epay because, you guys have been doing it for 20 plus years. It's a long time for carriers to get familiar, and factoring companies maybe more importantly. I mean, I think I agree with you. They might say carrier adoption. The problem is with that argument that 70 to 80% of the carriers that you work with likely factor. and all of the factoring companies already know how to use Epay.
Right. And they're already members.
They're already members. They're already invoicing us in a very efficient way on the Epay Manager side. So carrier adoption, in fact, becomes a benefit because, like you said, you have a ton more control who gets into your environment, and you have a ton more control over how you can handle and really cultivate those relationships and do really specific things with really specific carriers should they want it. Because as we all know, no factor, no carrier is really the same. So if you wanna respond and provide a heightened level of customer service to a particular carrier or factoring company, you have to know who they are, and you have to be able to control those things, which just aren't present in other platforms.
I agree.
Awesome. Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for the time, and reach out to schedule a demo or reach out to any of us directly. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.